P.O.V. of Pov by Catherine, Molly, and Zandy. Our thesis is the best measurement of poverty is a combination of the MPI and the SPM because together they both cover the physical resources each home should have and the income necessary to buy said resources. Our definition of poverty is when one lacks the proper resources to sustain their basic needs and well-being. Someone experiencing poverty may lack a sufficient amount of money, not enough money to buy food, clothing, shelter, have access to education, healthcare, utilities, and so much more. However, poverty shouldn't just focus on the absence of financial resources to pay for those basic needs. Rather, it should signify a lack of resources essential for a dignified human life.
Deciding upon the best measurement of poverty is no easy task. Organizations around the world have coined different ways and strategies to measure the scale and effect of poverty. However, we believe that combining the multidimensional poverty index, the MPI, and the supplemental poverty measure, the SPM, would produce the most effective way to measure poverty. The MPI, created in 2010, measures poverty on a global scale by the use of a deprivation list. They do so by creating a profile for each household and person in it. Then, they track deprivations by means of 10 indicators within the 3 dimensions: health, education, and standard of living. The 10 indicators are as follows. In health, they are nutrition and child mortality. In education, they are years of schooling and school attendance. And in living standards, they are cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. Each indicator holds equal weight within its dimension, with health and education making up 1/6 and the standards of living making up 1/8. If one person in a household experiences a deprivation, it affects the entire household score. According to the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index 2023 report released by the UN, quote, "A person's deprivation score is the sum of the weighted deprivations she or he experiences. The minimum value for deprivation scores is 33.3% because a person is identified as poor if she or he experiences 33.3% or more of all weighted deprivations," end quote. With the deprivation profile, the MPI identifies both the nature of someone's poverty and then just how poor they are with the deprivation score. The MPI provides an explicit and clear picture of a community's experience with poverty. By looking at factors such as education, health, and living standards rather than just income, the MPI does not discriminate against those who might technically have enough to meet the poverty line but do not have enough to live a sustainable life. The MPI also allows us to clearly see what areas of deprivation are most widespread and where. Based on the deprivation score, we can tell what country needs the most help and resources in what. For example, if one country has a particularly low score in the education dimension, that signals that policies should be directed towards education. The MPI paints a picture of what non-monetary needs need to be met on a global scale. However, while income is not the main aspect of poverty, it is a factor. And by combining the SPM with the MPI, we can expand our understanding of what poverty looks like. The inclusion of the SPM would add a monetary component to our measurement. The SPM is calculated based on a threshold of FCSUTI expenses, also known as average amount spent on modern basic needs. The SPM takes the total number of households in the U.S., calculates their spending on food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, and then finds the median. After finding that median, the threshold is set at 83% of median FCSUTI spendings, times 1.2 to account for any other expenses. Then the SPM takes those that fall under the 83% line and evaluates the household's gross annual income with some additions and subtractions. While there are other measurements of poverty that are based on income, the SPM is the first to include the addition of non-cash benefits and to subtract the cost of non-discretionary expenses when looking at a household's income. This is important as two households could have the same base level income but different resources or expenses, leading them to have different levels of need. For example, if someone is making $15,000 a year but they must pay $3,000 in taxes, then their income is really $12,000. The same can be said for someone receiving benefits. If they're making $15,000 but receiving $3,000 in non-cash benefits, then their true income is closer to $18,000. These additions and subtractions provide us with a more accurate measurement of income over a short period of time. The report Poverty in the United States, published by the U.S. Census Bureau, states that according to the SPM, the child poverty rate fell from 9.7% to 5.2% between 2020 and 2021, whereas the child poverty rate according to the OPM, which does not include non-cash benefits or non-discretionary expenses, fell from 16% to 15.3% between 2020 and 2021. This reflects the impact that non-cash benefits have on a family's living situation. As opposed to the OPM, the SPM takes into account help provided from non-cash benefits, such as the child tax credit, thus producing a lower, more accurate poverty rate than the OPM. The combination of the MPI and the SPM will result in a measure of poverty that looks at all angles of the issue. With the MPI, we can evaluate a household's standard of living, and with the SPM, a household's accurate income. Together, the two will provide us with the tools to approach policymaking, direct assistance, and simply bringing awareness to those experiencing poverty with the most dignity possible.
A capability is someone's ability to do something, and then a functioning is the completion of that capability. So, the capabilities approach is a valuable theory that highlights the freedom and dignity of those in poverty because they have the choice to complete the capability. The fact that the freedom is prioritized in the capabilities approach makes the theory unique from other measurements that do not consider that aspect of the well-being of those in poverty. Specifically, the capabilities approach incorporates not only the physical resources that one needs to thrive, but also allows someone the choice to decide if they want that resource. For example, everybody should have the ability and means to eat 3 nutritious meals a day. However, if somebody wanted to choose to not eat those 3 meals, then they do not have to. This is an advantage of the capabilities approach. The theory maintains a person's dignity by not simply throwing resources in their face, but giving them the option to choose what allows them to live their best life. This is why freedom is integral to the capabilities approach. The capabilities approach is vastly different from the other measurements of poverty due to the consideration of capabilities instead of solely using a monetary system. Unlike the OPM or other similar systems, the capabilities approach doesn't only evaluate a household based on their monetary status, like their gross annual income or their government benefits. While these facts are still useful, the capabilities approach expands the measurement of poverty by considering education, bodily health, state of mind, and even more. It is narrow-minded to only look at the financial status of a household to determine the well-being of the people living in it. While one measurement system will say a household is not in poverty due to their gross annual income, the capabilities approach looks deeper and will consider if everyone in that household can afford education, for example. The capabilities approach at times can seem vague. There are a vast number of abilities one needs to live each day. But how can you ensure that each person receives all of the abilities they need to live a dignified life? But the approach also provides conversion factors. Conversion factors match specific capabilities and functionings to each person's unique situation to cater to everybody's needs. Everyone will always have a different situation that could affect them in numerous unpredictable ways, so the conversion factors consider this dilemma. However, the capabilities approach does have its disadvantages. Nussbaum, one of the founders of the capabilities approach, created a list of 10 crucial capabilities in every person needs to have. However, the measurement of the intangible characteristics in Nussbaum's list can be inaccurate at times. For example, one could say that to measure sense, imagination, or thought, you could look at the percentage of children in school or pre-K in a certain area. Even though this is a helpful statistic, how do you technically know that all the children in pre-K developed a good sense of imagination? How could someone even measure the amount of imagination in a child's mind? This proves to be a challenge of the capabilities approach, but overall, the theory's advantages outweigh the disadvantages. In the end, the capabilities approach values every person's dignity through the consideration of abilities rather than just functionings, and this is advantageous to ensuring that each person meets their basic needs and can live life having enough of what they need. Lastly, the MPI uses the capabilities approach as a basis, which is our poverty measurement of choice.
Robert Rector has a very different take on poverty and what it means to him. He believes that the government measures such as OPM can be misleading as well as inaccurate. When someone says poverty, a typical person would think they would be living on the streets or don't have enough money for food. Which, yes, some people are living in those conditions, but in 2009, only 1 in 70 of each person living below the poverty line is actually homeless. So when people say living below the poverty line means you're homeless, Rector says you're wrong. The typical poor household, as defined by the government, has a car, air conditioning, 2 color televisions, cable, or satellite TV, a DVD player, and a VCR. When Rector describes someone experiencing poverty like this, I believe it is undermining the struggle of these households that they are facing day to day. Rector gives the statistic that 99.6% of poor households in the U.S. have a refrigerator. But this statistic could be narrow-minded. How did one get this refrigerator? Is the refrigerator full? Does it work? What did the household have to sacrifice to pay for this amenity? Overall, Rector does not agree with our definition nor the measurement of poverty. Even though households may have these amenities, I think he's correct in the fact that a lot of people misinterpret what people in poverty have, although he's undermining the people's quality of life based on what he thinks the standard of living should be.
All in all, we believe that poverty should be examined from all sides of a person's life. It is not a linear experience, nor can it be explained in a single phrase. The combination of different measurements, applications of the capabilities approach, and human perspectives will provide the most universal understanding of poverty.